Good afternoon. I'm glad you're watching. I know a lot of you are stuck at home today, like a lot of us are. I want you to know we're all in this together. For those of you who have been working, we're thankful for what you're doing to serve the rest of us. As you know, we're in a little bit of uncharted water in terms of where we are as a nation today. Now, to be sure, stuff like this has happened before, but it's been an awful long time and none of us remember. And there's a certain sense in which everything is uncertain. Stores are closed, schools are out, people are sort of stuck at home, and there's a level of anxiety that a lot of us are feeling that makes a lot of sense. And I'll be honest, I feel it too. But one of the things you discover when you read through the Bible is that God often uses difficult circumstances to produce positive results. As you go through the scriptures, there's a lot of different examples of that you see. One of my favorite examples of that is the story of the Old Testament hero Joseph. Now it's interesting, when you go back to the first book in the Bible, Genesis, there are 2 chapters that are devoted to the creation of the world, Genesis 1 and 2. But if you get to the end of Genesis, there are 13 chapters that tell the story of Joseph's life, Genesis 37 through Genesis 50, which lets us know, with all the real estate that Joseph takes up in Genesis, that there's something about his story that God wanted you and I to take very seriously. If you remember his story, then you know that Joseph was a person who experienced an awful lot of dramatic lows and then some dramatic highs later in his life. He starts out, he's sort of an arrogant young guy. He's the favorite son. His dad gives him this coat of many colors. He has these dreams, and it makes his brothers jealous, and his brothers sell him into slavery. A few months after that, he eventually winds up sold to this guy named Potiphar, who's an Egyptian official. So he goes to Potiphar's house. He's a slave for Potiphar, and apparently he's doing a really good job, because it says he sort of runs the household. But then something happens that Potiphar's wife gets her eye on Joseph, and Joseph does not respond to her temptations, and she falsely accuses Joseph of sexual assault. Pretty soon, Joseph finds himself in prison, even though he's completely innocent. Now, can you imagine what it would be like to go from favorite son to slave to household manager, and now you're in prison, even though you're completely innocent? You talk about some dramatic lows, that would be hard to imagine. While he's in prison, he meets this guy that's known as a cupbearer. He interprets this dream. He thinks this is going to be his ticket out of prison. It doesn't happen for him. 2 years later, 2 years later, the Egyptian Pharaoh calls for Joseph, and Joseph goes. He interprets this dream. The Pharaoh is so impressed that he makes Joseph the prime minister of Egypt. So now he's gone from prison to prime minister. Things are finally looking up for Joseph. Then all of a sudden, this famine hits the entire world. Nobody's sure what to do, but Joseph has this plan moving forward. And eventually, his brothers, the same guys who had sold him into slavery, show up, and they're wanting food. And when they get this meeting with the prime minister of Egypt, who happens to be their long-lost brother that they sold into slavery, they don't recognize him. So there's these 2 meetings where Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him, where the tension is thick. And then in Genesis 50, Joseph's father, a guy named Jacob, dies. And at this point, his brothers have figured it out, and they're scared to death that since their father has died, that Joseph is now going to exact his revenge. And I want you to listen to how Genesis 50 describes what happened. Genesis 50, verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrong we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you're to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves." Now check out this part. Genesis 50, verse 19. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and your children." And he reassured them, and he spoke kindly to them. There's 2 things you learn from this story. First, it's that God often uses difficult circumstances to produce positive results. So you think about the situation that you find yourself in. What are some positive things that could come from this? Well, I thought of a few. You can wear sweatpants to work. You can get an early start on your spring cleaning. You can clean out your refrigerator. You can eat those pizza rolls that have been in there, since 2005. You can catch up on your DVR, your Netflix. You can read some books. And all of that, you're going to have some downtime. But there are some more important things that you can do to make this time a positive time for you and your family. One of the number one complaints all of us have during normal times is that we're too busy, life's too fast, the schedule's too crowded, the pace is too quick, and now all of us have been forced to hit the brakes. So what do you do to make this a meaningful time? Well, there's three things. Number one, you can reconnect with your family. For some of you, it's time to reintroduce yourself to your family, just like Joseph and his brothers. You can share some meals together. You can watch some movies together. You can take some walks together. I saw a picture online yesterday of some moms who were sitting on a driveway outside about 10 feet apart in their neighborhood. And when's the last time you had a conversation with your family? Just everybody sitting around the room doing nothing but talking. So it's a good time to reconnect with your family. It's also a good time to refocus on what really matters. You get to a time like this, and a lot of the stuff that's taken up a lot of our time over the years is suddenly disappeared. And when all of that periphery stuff is stripped back, you get a chance to focus on what's really essential. You can take care of your family, take care of your health, the things that really matter as we move forward. And then lastly, it's a good time to go deeper in your relationship with God. We talk a lot in these last few days about social distancing, but whatever you do, don't distance yourself from God. I want to encourage you to read your Bible together. Pray with your family. This Sunday at 11 a.m., you can tune in here. We're going to have a live service online. We're going to be talking about unexpected storms and how do you deal with all of that sort of stuff that's happening. And I hope you'll make it a point. You and your family gather together at 11 o'clock, sing with us, pray with us, listen to the message, and then you can apply it and talk amongst yourselves. Something else you can do to refocus on your relationship with God and reconnect with God is maybe turn off the news. Listen to K-Love. Get on Spotify. Listen to playlists. Just learn to worship in your home with your family. The other thing I wanted to point out to you that may be a positive result from all of the difficult circumstances we now find ourselves in. Genesis 50, verse 20, Joseph says, hey, you intended to harm me, but God used this for good to accomplish the saving of many lives. And historically, if you go back, in times of national tragedy, in times of national difficulty and upheaval, more and more people turn to God. Do you think it's possible that God could use what's happening now to reach some people who previously haven't been interested? Do you think it's possible that God could use all of the turmoil, all of the uncertainty that we're now facing as a country to turn people back towards Him? If you think that's possible, you get to be a part of that. Now could be a great time to start some strategic conversations with people that maybe you haven't talked to in a while. And talk about some things that maybe you haven't talked about in a while. So I want to encourage you, in the midst of all the uncertainty, let's stay focused on what really matters.